Behind me is the Bure Bridge in Great Yarmouth. It spans from Yarmouth to Runham over the River Bure. Nowadays, it is an essential commuting point for people going to and from Yarmouth. On the surface, it just seems like any other unassuming bridge nearby, just a boring concrete structure in the middle of a busy town. But what many don't know is that 180 years ago, this bridge was the site of one of the greatest tragedies to happen in Norfolk. This is the story of the Great Yarmouth Bridge Disaster. In 1810, a man by the name of Robert Corey purchased an estate in Runham called the Vauxhall Gardens. Corey was part of a wealthy family and a solicitor in the town, holding great power over the decisions made for it. The estate he purchased was across the River Bure in Yarmouth, and so a toll ferry was put into place to allow people to cross it. Yarmouth's economy had been growing over the past years, as the Napoleonic Wars had boosted the population and usefulness of the town. However, as the war came to an end, the town's economy diminished and its transport began falling behind. The town was in desperate need of support, and Robert Corey took this opportunity.
Yarmouth in the 1820s was just recovering from an economic depression following the Napoleonic Wars, which ended in 1815. I suppose that the town had always been actually controlled by a number of families, if you like, a sort of civic elite. There were people like the Prestons, who were involved in shipbuilding, and the Lakens, and people like the Worship family. The Coreys were part of this sort of civic elite, although they came from, as I just mentioned, a lawyer family.
Corey had long proposed for a bridge to be built over the River Bure, stating that it'd only be a matter of time before somebody builds one. And so, in about 1823, he spent a considerable amount of money to push for the construction of one. The committee, however, did not think that the proposed tolls would cover the expense of the bridge, and so the project was abandoned. This was until 1826, where Corey found that the town was planning to build a bridge over the river anyway. Corey took this opportunity and obtained an Act of Parliament for the bridge to be built in favour of his estate in Bowling Green, sneaking in a clause where no other bridge or ferry can be constructed within a mile of his. This would mean that the only way to cross would be to use his bridge and to pay the toll. By 1827, plans for construction began, and Corey employed the help of a local builder by the name of Godfrey Goddard. Goddard was initially tasked with making plans and models for the bridge, but after Corey's oldest son, Isaac, criticised its design, he instead turned to the architect, John Joseph Scholes. Scholes was a prominent English architect at the time, having previously designed many parks and buildings, and so he seemed equipped for the task of designing the bridge.
He wanted to make it spectacular. He wanted to make a statement about his status, if you like, in the town. So therefore he decided on a suspension bridge. It was supposed to be, and was, very smart. He had his crests on either side of the stanchions and things like that. So as far as the bridge is concerned, if you like, it was a bit of a vanity project.
The design of the bridge consisted of a deck with a span of 19 metres and two large towers holding metal chains suspending the bridge. Construction started in 1828 by Godfrey Goddard, supervised by a Mr. Green. The chains holding up the bridge were made of two sets of metal eye-bars that had been constructed by a local blacksmith. Unbeknownst to Scholes, the bridge's span was increased to 26 metres. Although the chains were extended accordingly to the bridge's new length, Unusually, the towers supporting them remained the same height. In total, the bridge would have cost about £4 million in today's money, but the financial risk paid off because it attracted many investors into the later construction to the connecting road to Achill. Perhaps the final important thing to note was that in April, Corey decided that the toll house should be moved from the Yarmouth side of the bridge to the Runham side, making it so the toll only needs to be paid once the bridge is fully crossed. The bridge remained fully operational for about 3 years until 1832, where the road from Yarmouth to Achill was routed over the bridge. This decision would have brought significantly more traffic to the bridge, which at the time only had one lane of traffic available. To compensate for this, the bridge was widened by about ½ metre on each side, and the rails on the sides were moved to the very edge, maximising the amount of space on the bridge. Additionally, a few years later, after a dispute with a railway company, the bridge was further widened and a footpath was added for pedestrians to cross. The following year, a travelling circus, Cook's Royal Circus, was coming to Great Yarmouth. The circus, founded by Thomas Cook, was a popular travelling circus at the time, known for its many equestrian, acrobat and strongman acts. The circus was one of many circus families at the time, where many of its performers would have been from the Cook family themselves. The circus had gained notable fame after a favourable visit to King William IV and Queen Adelaide had given them the title of Royal Circus. In 1842, one of the circus's clowns, Nelson, demonstrated a particularly unique trick in Aberdeen that proved to be quite popular. Nelson promised to sail the harbour in a washtub pulled by geese, a seemingly ludicrous feat. But, to the shock of the thousands of spectators, he followed through on his promise, creating a rather memorable spectacle as he floated along with 2 geese leading him. The trick was not completely original, however, as it had been demonstrated previously in London in 1809 by the clown and performer Richard Usher. Of course, he was not actually pulled along by the geese, as the trick was achieved by a rowboat in front pulling him along with a rope that was obscured by the water. In the evening of the 2nd of May 1845, a large crowd of over several thousand gathered to view the trick, and according to eyewitnesses, at least 300 were standing on the bridge, many of which were children with their parents. The majority of the crowd were situated on the southeastern corner of the bridge to have the best view of the clown passing under them while also allowing carriages to pass by. Under the immense stress of the crowd, the bridge started breaking. Some of the crowd noticed that something had gone wrong, but it did not raise enough concern for anyone to be alerted. But unbeknownst to them, the bridge was getting close to its tipping point, and after about 5 minutes of holding out, the weight became too much and the chain snapped. The south side of the bridge crashed into the water, sending people tumbling down into the river. The north side, however, remained suspended, still hanging from its chain. As the people slammed down into the water, many of the children, who were crowded at the front, were sadly crushed under the weight of the people behind them. One child was even saved by their mother holding onto their clothes with her teeth. At the time of the collapse, a horse and cart was crossing, and would have fell in if it was not for the horse backing up in time. As the crowd of people panicked around in the water, onlookers had to scramble to help them.
Basically, panic set in. There was a huge crowd there. There were people in small boats also watching the clown on the river, etc. And certainly they went to help the people in the water. However, of course, a complete disaster ensued. They managed to get a lot of people out of the water, and those that were in a state of helplessness, they took to the local inns in the area, if you like, the tap rooms in these inns became morgues.
In total, 79 people died on that day, 59 of which were children. The youngest, Mary Ann Lake, was only 2 years old when the bridge took her life. The disaster would have been devastating for Yarmouth at the time, affecting dozens, if not hundreds, of families, many of which would have lost a loved one on that day. 27 coffins were all buried in a single day at St. Nicholas's Church. The entire funeral service was read over each one by the vicar Henry Mackenzie and 4 other clergymen. Some believed the event to be judgment for the people's sins, and multiple religious sermons were held, but there is no doubt it was a tragedy. And soon enough, an investigation was launched. The British government commissioned a report by James Walker, the past president of the Institution of Civil Engineers, among other investigators, as to the cause of the collapse. Walker found that Scholes did correctly specify that high-quality iron be used in the construction of the eye-bars, but neglected to actually test them. The widening of the bridge was likely one of the main reasons for the collapse, as the extra weight put on was not properly accommodated for. They attributed the initial failure of the bridge to one of the eye-bars snapping, leaving the other one to take all the weight of the bridge, before it, too, broke under the stress. One of the reasons why the eye-bars may have snapped was because they were each made of 3 separate pieces. Since eye-bars typically have to hold a lot of weight, they are forged out of a single piece, so there are no weak points. But assembling it in multiple pieces weakens specific sections and makes them more prone to snapping. Additionally, one of the scarf joints between the components had been incompletely welded, further increasing its weakness. Finally, each end or eye of the eye-bars was made out of lower quality metal than the rods. As insignificant as these factors may seem, it was these oversights that eventually led to the bridge's collapse. The bridge could not stay collapsed, of course, and in 1847, the bridge was rebuilt to continue operation. In about 1920, the tolls of the bridge were abolished, and by 1930, the bridge was disused entirely for its outdated construction. This was until 1972, where a new bridge was built, made from concrete and steel and built to much more modern construction standards. It's very unlikely that the bridge will ever come to disaster again anytime soon. It seems, unfortunately, that the tragedy has been largely forgotten about nowadays. About the only evidence you can still find of it is a memorial along the river, a blue plaque on a nearby building, and a book written about it. I personally only actually found out about the event after my grandfather told me, but it's important to remember events like this, to learn and to commemorate. Even though history has put many years of distance between us, these people still had their own lives and their own dreams. They loved, they laughed, they cried. It must have been a horrible event to witness. History is something to remember and something to learn from. And if a story can be learned from, then it's a story worth telling. And so the next time you go over a boring, unassuming bridge or past an old, run-down building, just know it might not be as boring as you may think. Just know it might not be as boring as you may think.